Does Iran pose a grave threat to the United States?
No.
And if that be the case, then, and since at least according to the last 20 years, both the CIA and the Mossad have both publicly said that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. They're increasing their capacity, the breakout time is shrinking, etc. But so far, they have not actually had it. So what is the impetus right now that seems to be compelling these, urgent actions to tell them they can't have a bomb when they don't have one?
The Israel lobby.
Is that okay? Towards what end? Because actually, in the Israeli media today, there is some concern on their side that the Netanyahu government is trying to compel Trump into this. It says that he is inspired by Trump to act after Biden's warning against altering democracy. Actually, that's not the one I was looking for, Gary, not just yet. There was another one where the Israelis were saying that they're trying to go to war against Iran and trying to drag the United States in with him. So there seems to be some acknowledgement. Yeah, that's the one right there. So that's what the Haaretz is saying, the Israeli media. Is that true?
On the face of it, yes.
And so why do you suppose that, this is a silly question, but Trump, who's nearly everywhere else always talking about wanting peace, he wants to stop the killing, et cetera, like in the Ukraine war here, and he's always been against stupid wars, especially in the Middle East. But why do you suppose that he would be convinced? And money aside, I mean, a lot of people gave money to his campaign. Why would he be so willing to go down a path that I think would be clearly antagonistic for the United States and terribly unproductive?
The Israel lobby.
But but I get that they wanted that. There's no question about that. The question is, why are we participating in it?
I think you have to go back and look at what's happened over the last 3 decades. Mark Levin is a very articulate spokesman for that position. And the argument has been forever, whether it's the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, which we finally usually call the Foundation for the Destruction of Everything. These entities have all been extraordinarily well-financed for many, many years to push the United States into direct conflict with Iran on the grounds that Israel as a state in the Middle East will never be secure or safe until Iran is subjugated. Now, subjugated means its offensive military capability, which is all missile, frankly, and firepower over great distance, in other words, striking power, until that's eliminated. That's the position. And the Israel lobby has funded everyone on the Hill holding a position in the House or the Senate, as well as candidates to become members of the cabinet. They have funded that position and people that support it. Right now, they exert more control directly over how Congress will behave, over how the White House will behave as a result than they ever have in their past. So what you're effectively is asking me is, if this is not really in the interest of the American people, why is President Trump prepared to do it? And I think it's because President Trump obviously favors Israel. There's no mystery at that, and I certainly understand that. But he also made commitments in the run-up to the election and over the last couple of years that if he were elected, he would follow through on this. And I think that's the essence of his ultimatum. Now, I don't think ultimatums are a good idea. They don't usually work. We gave an ultimatum to Spain in 1898, and actually the Spaniards pretty much accepted it, and we still went to war with them. A similar event happened with Austria-Hungary vis-a-vis Serbia. The Serbs accepted all the provisions of the ultimatum except one, And Austria-Hungary should have been satisfied with that, but instead went to war. And I think the Iranians are looking at what we're saying to them as another ultimatum that will inevitably lead to war against them. And most states, most of the time, no matter how small they may be, and remember, Serbia was quite small in comparison to Austria-Hungary. Spain, though it was still in the rank of, I would say, middleweight power, it was a long way from the Western Hemisphere, but they don't usually negotiate well under pressure. In other words, if you threaten them, they find it very difficult to accede to your wishes. So I think we're in a difficult position now because we've made this ultimatum. Either you sit down and talk to us, which implies that we're going to demand from you some version of what previously we had with the Obama administration, this GCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Agreement about nuclear weapons. And you've got to do this with us now, or we're going to bomb you into the Stone Age.
And but part of the problem with that is that they're not even going back to that one. I think they're asking something that's almost impossible for the Iranians to add. What's being reported is two specifically new components. One is that they dismantle their entire long-range missile capacity, so they don't have the ability to transport any nuclear warheads, and then that they dismantle, like physically, their nuclear energy program to include all the centrifuges, everything, so that they can't even do it. And I can't think of any nation on the planet that would agree to that.
Well, I tend to agree with you, and I think the underlying truth is Israel has us in a position where we are obligated to support anything they do, and they are waging a war for regional supremacy, effectively a war to subjugate everyone in the region to their will.
But
and as long as they have us, they're quite confident they can achieve that.
Yeah,
if they're on their own, it's a much more difficult proposition.
But I'm not convinced that they could accomplish that militarily anyway. I mean, let's just look at the first element of it, the Iran part. You touched on this a second ago, but just from a military perspective for the moment, let's say that the U.S. gave the support similar to what we did when we helped Israel, and it's the couple of times when it's either fended off attacks from Iran or assisted apparently in some of the Iranian attacks into Iran. But if you actually went to war with them and said, all right, we're going to bomb your facilities, et cetera, what would Iran likely do in response? And then how would we counter that? Meaning, this seems like to me it could go off the rails, but not succeed. You're not going to destroy a country just by air and missile power.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you. And I've written on this subject and talked about it. And this is a subject for discussion about the plausibility of what we think we can or can't do. I think the coming strikes scheduled for the Houthis are designed to be a demonstration, in fact, of what can be done to Iran. I don't think that's going to change anything in Iran, as you know. But you've got to understand that you're asking the really critical question is, go ahead and bomb, and then what?
Right.
What comes after? And after, to the Israelis and to the Washington government right now, administration, is the inability of Iran to pose any threat under any circumstances to Israel. Period. Which means that it's effectively disarmed and rendered impotent as a nation. It's not sovereign anymore because anything it does to create a military capability beyond its borders to defend itself in the form of missiles, rockets, or anything else is unacceptable. The other issue is, what does this mean for the Egyptians? What does this mean for the Turks? What does this mean for the Saudis, the Emirates? And obviously, with Russia now having signed what effectively is a mutual defense pact with Iran, what does this mean for Russia? And China, that has made it very clear that in the event that we attack Iran, they will stand by Iran. So you're right. I'm not arguing against you. The point is that that's not really being discussed. The point is They want a war and they want to bomb. And they're convinced that high altitude bombing combined with missile strikes can render Iran incapable of waging war in the future against anyone. And that as a result, Israel will then reign supreme over the region.
That assumes that they can destroy all of their nuclear missile capabilities like in one fell swoop, because otherwise, Doug, I mean, what about this is one of the things that irks me the most from any U.S. administration. There are a lot of U.S. forces peppered around Syria and Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East that are completely vulnerable to a lot of the better missiles that Iran has. And if we get into a war with them, what's to stop them from actually attacking our own people? And a lot of the air defenses on those smaller bases are not adequate to defend against. I mean, we could have our own people killed.
Well, the answer to your question is nothing. Nothing can stop it. And I think President Trump is acutely sensitive to that reality. The question is he willing to risk that on the assumption that the damage to Iran will be so severe that they will not respond in that way? Or if they attempt to respond in that way, matters will simply be worse for them. You know, we're not privileged to sit in on the discussions and the consultations. And so we don't know. You know, I'm sure there are voices that are saying, well, we could use tactical nuclear weapons to utterly annihilate the Houthis or potentially utterly annihilate the Iranian nuclear capability. To me, that would be sheer lunacy. I would say that's the first step towards Armageddon. And you can't disguise what you're doing. If you used any sort of nuclear device, it would register. And the predisposition at that point would be for lots of countries to take up arms against us. So I don't know what the answer is. You're asking all the right questions. I cannot conceive of any set of circumstances under which I would support an attack on Iran based upon what I've seen thus far. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it'll work. And I think it could have terrible consequences regionally and beyond the region, potentially in Europe, Asia, and the United States. So I don't support it. And I'm not in the administration, and neither are you. So I think we should come to the understandable conclusion that our opinion is unwanted. So I don't know what's being discussed behind closed doors, but I think the decision has been made to do something. And it inevitably revolves around high altitude bombing and missile strikes. Now we're adding another carrier battle group. We could have as many as 3 there very shortly, depending upon decisions in Washington. That would certainly beef up the fighter jets. And also remember that those flotillas include other naval ships and vessels that carry lots of missiles. And you have submarines. So there's a lot of firepower being assembled that could be directed at Iran. And I think the Iranians know that. I think the Russians know it. The Chinese know it. It's a difficult situation. But the gauntlet is being tossed in front of Iran. Either sit and negotiate with us on the terms that you accurately cited, or face the equivalent of Armageddon. We will bomb the living daylights out of you.
Well, so in the remaining time we have left here, Doug, I
don't have much time, so I got to go in about four minutes. So
okay, whatever time you have left, what would Russia and China do, given their interest in the last few minutes you have? What would they do in the event that we actually do attack?
Well, obviously, I haven't sat in on any consultations there either. So all I can do is speculate, but I would think that a determined assault on Iran would persuade the Russians that they must act to support Iran, because if they do not, they are probably next on the menu, in which case China may also reach a similar conclusion. They may decide that we're a rogue state, that we are no longer calculable. In other words, we're not measured. We're incautious. And as a result, they've got to take action to support Iran, which would include action against us.